Whew. Why is this so hard to watch? Seriously, what you've heard is true. Won't You Be My Neighbor is just about the biggest tearjerker of a documentary I can remember seeing where nothing sad actually happens. I mean, Mr. Rogers died in 2003, so that's obviously in there, but he didn't come to a tragic end. He lived the life he seemed to want to, did what he wanted to do, was tremendously successful at it, is remembered by everyone they find to talk to as a great man. There's no big dark secret or hidden tragedy to uncover, and yet there's something profoundly affecting and heartbreaking about the whole thing. I'm not quite sure what it is. Maybe it's nostalgia, maybe it's the guilt you feel looking at someone who so often did the right thing and realizing all the times you didn't. Maybe the world really is in such a terrible state at this point that all it takes is the story of a decent person setting out to do something decent and succeeding at it to the genuine benefit of God knows how many people to make you wonder if that kind of thing can even happen anymore. Whatever it is, Won't You Be My Neighbor is a one-of-a-kind movie-watching experience that proves emotionally devastating even as it's also being spiritually and psychologically uplifting. For viewers outside the United States who may not immediately be familiar, Fred Rogers was an ordained Presbyterian minister from Pennsylvania who decided he was more interested in the fields of child development and television media, and in 1968 started a children's television show called Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, which combined live-action segments, puppets, and documentary footage, all centering around a gently delivered messages about general education, life lessons, and above all else, Rogers' own personal commitment to the then fairly radical belief that children needed to have their own innate sense of self-worth and self-esteem continually reinforced, not just for accomplishment, but as a matter of course, not something they could attain or lose. He did this for over 900 episodes and specials for about 3 decades, give or take, between 68 and 2001, using his platforms to teach kids about the importance of imagination and make-believe, but also the importance of recognizing the difference between fantasy and reality, respect for authority, but also the need to challenge it, without a lot of flash or spectacle and an almost militant defiance of the concept of production value. He just sort of faced a camera and talked to children like they were his equal peers about things he thought people didn't talk to children enough about: life, death, divorce, tolerance, racism, war, the Kennedy assassination when it happened. Hell, right up to the end, he was doing spots about coping with 9/11, and despite being a man of God, he never pushed a religious or ideological point of view in any of it. The documentary mainly follows the development of the show and Rogers' unlikely emergence as not just a television star and pop culture icon, but as a passionate advocate for children's causes and the cause of public television, where his show aired for the majority of its runtime. The famous moment where he argued in front of a US Senate panel to avoid cutting PBS funding and unexpectedly won after reciting one of his self-composed songs from the show is in there, and even having seen it, it's still hard to believe it's something that actually happened in real life. And as you might expect, the film finds suitably hiss-worthy villains when it gets to the point where 21st century conservative TV pundits on Fox News are accusing him of ruining a generation by telling kids they were special just for being themselves, God forbid. The film does make an attempt to get to the bottom of just how someone who seems to be so impossibly good could be, focusing on interviews with close friends, family, and surviving members of the cast and crew from the series. Some myths get debunked too. No, he wasn't secretly a sniper in Vietnam. We get some insight that yes, the real Fred Rogers had a grown-up sense of humor and fears and doubts and was human. There are details about a childhood dealing with illness and being bullied for weight problems that make accompanying scenes demonstrating how he sometimes found it easier to express himself emotionally through one of his hand puppets have an extra special weight added to them, to the point where it almost feels like you're seeing him a little too clearly. But if your reason for going to see this is you want to be reassured that at least one guy people thought of as a hero when they were kids didn't turn out to be a scumbag, yeah, apparently he was the real thing. In fact, about the only thing close to a blemish anyone can seem to find for the whole runtime is that he wasn't as ahead of his time about his friend and colleague Francois Clemens, who played Officer Clemens on the series, being openly out of the closet while working on the show, which is something he later comes around on. And meanwhile, Clemens is one of the most prominently featured interviewees in the film and talks about the man as though he'd been working for Christ the whole time. It's really something to see. Apart from being a great example of one of the best ways to render a documentary, find someone interesting and talk to their friends, the best recommendation I think I can give to Won't You Be My Neighbor is that it feels like a revival and continuation of Rogers' own actual work. You come out of it feeling like this person was so right about the potential for media and broadcast media especially to be enriching and do good for people and children especially, that you want to see things be better. I mean, I do this for a living, so obviously I felt a certain personal level of, hey, get off your ass and help. But apart from that, it's quite an experience, and I think the need for something overwhelmingly positive at a moment where even the people glad about the state of the world seem to agree that it's falling apart around us is why it was such a phenomenon on the festival circuit, and why it's getting the sort of release documentaries about public TV kids show hosts don't generally get in theaters starting next week. 4 stars, one of the year's big must-sees.